Better late than never. It's the
Meglio che ta-
Migrating to Australia podcast, video show, multimedia adventure that it is. I'm Grant
always,
Williams.
always say meglio che tardi che mai, better late than never. A bit of Italian
Exactly.
for
And
you.
and haven't we got uh, Eid Mubarak or something today too, David? Is
Ed Mubarak, yeah, we've got.
your
Well, I'll tell you what, it's all happening. It's been a busy week,
Yep.
and we've
Right.
got a budget to talk
Stop.
about.
Stop. Stop. I'm Grant Williams. I produce this show. I have no special skills in immigration, but the man that I'm talking to, Australia's best and friendliest immigration lawyer, is
Definitely
Mr. David.
friendliest.
Is
How are
Mr.
you,
David
Grant?
Bongiorno. Now I'm going with best, David. I'm just don't you contradict me today. I'm going with best.
Budget on Tuesday, and we're going to have a little bit of a look at that. No great glory, no wonderful news, but reasons to be mildly optimistic moving forward.
Well, there was one thing, David, that I think could be wonderful, but you know me, I doubt the intentions of the government when I see something. The removal of the hourly cap that the international students can work has
In
the
particular
potential
sectors.
has the potential to be amazing, but I believe that that will just be taken away as soon as the pressure goes back on employment domestically, and there are plenty of domestic people looking for employment. I think that they will kick that away, but speculation for
No,
now.
I think you're right. It's a wonderful temporary measure. How long is temporary? As long as the
Well,
pandemic exists and ceases to be an issue, I think they'll have it. They'll run it for those sectors
I think it'll run
until
into 2023. That will be
and
that would
and,
be my
and,
tip.
and then it will be abandoned. I believe you're correct. I believe that's fair speculation. That's
Can we speculate on the other thing too? Where because I want to take a victory lap on this one, David. We've had a bit of a word off air about this. The government has introduced a 4-year waiting period for new migrants before they can access any government services. Now,
what is it
we've
saving?
talked,
$651 million, according to the Treasurer, which
which I think he gave straight off to Twiggy Forrest from Fortescue Mining, so Fortescue Metals. What's a why would one of Australia's richest men need some money out of the
that's right.
public purse? But
That's exactly right.
but that measure, David, my speculation is that this is their backdoor way to vet sponsors of spouse partner visa applicants, but also I think to tighten up on which employers are bringing people in as well. So,
Well, from a partner perspective, I mean, thank God we don't have what the UK has or had, an income threshold for sponsors, because, up until now, the Australian government hasn't really interfered, really. A little bit. There's regulation on who you can bring in as a spouse to this country, who you cannot bring in. And if you're of bad behaviour, you'll be severely limited in what you can do if you want to bring somebody in as a sponsor. But to have a 4-year waiting period to save $651 million. Well, Grant, what's $651 million really? What is it really?
well, if you or I had it, it would be a lot, but in the context of the federal budget, it's nothing.
That's
Now
right.
you
That's
said
right.
you just said that the government until now hasn't interfered
It
in
hasn't really. I mean, if
this.
you're a bad character as a sponsor, it's very tough to be a sponsor, to sponsor someone if you're a bad character. But up until now, it's been pretty good. There's rules to prevent serial sponsorship, which are very important. That's to stop elderly Australian men bringing in young brides from particular parts of the world. So that sponsorship rule, that limitation, is a wonderful thing. But what's going to happen with the 4 years? Well, it's going to be very hard for certain people. I mean,
Well, I think.
I don't know
Sorry,
what they'll
David.
do. I don't know what they'll
I,
be able to do.
I
It
I
is the
think
way.
the I think the interfering has begun, and they will soon be passing out rubber gloves to the department, and the examinations will begin. David.
Metaphorically,
Well, I
when we talk
hope
about
so.
rubber gloves, it's a metaphor. But
That's
no, I
right.
mean, one of the things one of the important things that did stand out, there appears to be no intention to increase visa fees, which is good because we're a very expensive country to migrate to anyway. So no
Now,
visa.
and there was a an intention stated in the budget to return to the immigration level that we
Same.
had pre-pandemic. But there were a
160,
whole lot of caveats on that too. So again, I
160,000,
yeah,
and they'll be giving PR to people who are already here, looking at the pool to make 160,000 from who we have here.
yeah. So that was one of the caveats, that the 160,000. It's not going to be new entrants
People who are
mostly.
already here.
Yeah, mostly it's going to be people who are already on the pathway here.
It's encouraging there's no visa fee increase. The AAT, the Administrative Appeals Tribunal, the MR, the Migration Review Division, there will be a fee increase for non-refugee matters, people who have partner visas, student visas, work visas refused. They'll have to pay more for review. What will be interesting, over the years that I've done immigration law, when we won at the AAT, the MR division, we'd get all our money back, our visa, our review fee back. A few years back, they halved it. So if you win, you get half the money back. They keep half.
And
Wonder
now,
what they'll do. Wonder what they'll do for a win
now,
now.
now
I
they'll
wonder
just
what
say,
they'll do. That's it.
"Thanks
You
for
won.
coming.
Well done.
Thanks for
Thanks for
coming.
coming.
Here's a sticker."
Yeah, exactly.
That's what it'll be like. International students, David.
Oh, nothing. So disappointing.
Yeah,
Really, the budget was silent, literally silent on international students.
and in the press conferences afterwards, the federal government basically said, this is the way I interpreted it. See whether you agree. They seem to say, well, the states have got the caps on people coming back in. The numbers that land in each city each week are the state's issue, so we can't really do anything about it, which to me seems like they are just completely risk averse. They do not want any chance of a plane load of international students organised by the federal government landing in Australia and then us having some kind of breakout of COVID. I mean, look, David, my political comment for the day will probably be limited to this. We've just had a plane load come in from India. Well, it wasn't really a plane load because they let for 140 book, and then they said no, not 40. 40 plus the close contact. So it was the 40 people who tested positive plus their wife or partner or children or father or mother. So we ended up bringing about 80 people, I think was the number. About 80 to 90 after they'd booked for 140, and they told them as they were coming, as they were preparing to go to the airport, they said, "Don't bother." So
Leaves
I
them
don't
in
know.
a state of high anxiety. When will they? I mean, are they bumped from the queue because they have COVID? When will
I
they
don't
get
know.
their opportunity?
I don't know. And David, I will just say what I saw in the news just before we were first coming on. The government have said, we're not responsible if any of the Australians who are stuck in India or the permanent residents do die or suffer any ill health effects, because apparently the chief medical officer's advice is that it's better off to leave people where they can't get medical treatment than to bring them here where they might be able to get medical treatment. So Any of you who are listening overseas, it seems that in 2 years' time we have taken a radical turn as a country about who we value, where we value them.
They do say, and it will be Tudge's call, I think, that a small quota, a small number of international students will be allowed to enter from the end of the year, and pending how well that program is implemented for the students to enter Australia, larger numbers to increase progressively over 2022. That remains to be seen whether that happens. There was talk last year or this year and last year of introduction of international students. There was the pilot program in Darwin, and then everything else. Adelaide turned to dust because they had a COVID outbreak, and November, December, if that's when they're going to bring in international students on a trial basis for starting February 2022, well, let's see how that goes and whether they actually do that.
The thing that talks to me there's always subtext and what the messages of
the government,
what weren't
absolutely
said, what wasn't said, and what people are speculating. But the really important thing that wasn't in the budget was there was nothing allocated to set up some new quarantine facilities to get people into the country. The Queensland Premier has made a definite negative statement about that yesterday, I believe, or overnight.
I do like students being able to work full time in hospitality and tourism. That is very important. That is a plus.
That's the main thing, but that's for the people who are here. So
correct.
So
I mean, it's something. It's too late, and it's too many people are already gone or about to go. But it is something for those who've been able to stay here. It is something.
And the other message, David, that I think talks to people coming in, they've also said, without putting a date on it, that travel outbound, except to possible bubbles like New Zealand already, but maybe Singapore, maybe one or two other countries, that's not open to Australians until 2022 sometime. So we're looking at 12 more months. If we're not going out, I don't believe the government can politically have people coming in.
People are allowed to go out. They are allowed to go out, but they've got to have exceptional reasons. They've got to have powerful, compelling reasons.
It basically means...
if a parent
means you can't go out, David. I mean, you and I can't book a ticket and reasonably expect to be allowed to go anywhere. If you had a branch office in another country,
that'd be okay.
Well,
you still have to apply for exemption.
Possibly,
you still have to apply for an exemption if you're wanting. If a parent or a sibling is ill, that is sufficient grounds because that is exceptional. It's compelling. There is a test. You do have to. Australian permanent residents, Australian citizens, still and will have to seek permission to leave. They can't just get up and leave.
Yeah, and the point I'm making, David, is really that we can't expect significant economic shifts, domestic economic shifts in the sectors that rely on the migration of people or the movement of people in and out of the country. And I think that politically they will have to apply that to international students the same way that
if international students are brought in on chartered flights and universities collaboratively make arrangement for quarantine on campus.
But that's the problem. Who's going to fund it?
They will.
Do you think the universities will?
Oh, I think they may. I mean, it's dire straits for them at the moment.
And where are they going to find the qualified people to man them? I mean, the states have barely got enough people to run their quarantine systems. So how are we going to set up a parallel system, an independent parallel stream where the risk of the risk of the leak into the community, which is what everyone's paranoid about, it is not there. I just can't see it happen. I think they'll talk about it.
They will.
I think they'll talk about it. I don't think it'll ever happen.
Intention will never manifest into a reality.
Maybe Melbourne University, University of Sydney, and UQ will do it.
They've got the coin to do it.
That's right. But I can't see it. I can't see it happening in Bathurst, or I just can't see it happening.
No.
On a major scale. I think we might be talking about 50, 60 people per semester per university. I can't.
I think a smart strategy, and migration is strategy. A smart strategy for those who are here, who have partners, is to genuinely consider the partner visa pathway. If they're in genuine relationships,
definitely,
there was 100% nothing wrong with using the love of your Australian partner, your partner's love of you, as a vehicle for migration. A lot of people say to me, "Oh, I want to do it on my own. I want to do it on my own skill, my own talent." And there's some wonderfully skilled, wonderfully talented people in this country on temporary residency. But, in this circumstance, it may not be enough. It may not be enough. So there's absolutely no shame, nothing wrong with doing a partner visa, nothing.
I mean, it's difficult times and there's extraordinary things going on. And, I think some people might be forced to make decisions, to bring forward decisions
Correct.
that they might have made
the mind.
later.
Focuses the mind.
Because I think we've said it over and over and over again. At the moment, it's really, really hard to get in here.
It's very hard to get in here. If you're a doctor or a nurse, it's not so hard. But if you're a butcher, baker, candlestick maker, it's impossible. I feel tremendous sympathy for the accounting students who've been deceived, misled to come here to study accounting with a view to permanent residency. It's not happening. It's not happening. And they
haven't put podcast production assistant on the list either, David. So I can't.
It's funny you
help.
should raise that. It's funny you should raise the relevant lists. The problem with the ANSCO, the Australian New Zealand Standard Classification of Occupations, which is the Bible that defines the Bible, the Torah, the Quran. It defines
the Bhagavad Gita.
It defines all the occupations, and it's out of date. It's really out of date.
Yeah,
I mean, data scientist doesn't have an accurate classification. There are a lot of new occupations that are very important that aren't recognised for migration purposes.
Like podcast producer. Well, I mean, seriously, the skills required for new media to do it effectively and communications and whatnot, they're needed. They're really badly needed. David, what did they do with the list? Did anything happen with any of the lists?
Well, what they do have to do with the priority skilled migration occupation list, they've got to add more occupations. They have to. There's only 18 at the moment, 18, 19. They have to add many more. What everybody's got to remember too, the priority, what is it? It's 19. I made some notes. I'm just having a look. Yeah, priority skilled migration occupation list. Basically, what everybody's got to remember about this list is that it's sponsored. So it doesn't allow for individuals. You've got to be sponsored by a business. It's not independent migration. The state of Victoria, the state of New South Wales, the state of Queensland, they all have their state-sponsored programs where individuals can migrate, but they're only taking people onshore. With the priority skilled migration occupation list for sponsors for 482, 491, 494, 482, 494, they can bring people in from overseas. They can. But the states are not allowing offshore applicants for the 491 or the 190. There's got to be a more an easier way, because how does the doctor or how does the doctor or the social worker who's in London or is in Malaysia get sponsored to come to Australia? It requires a lot more legwork than being able to seek sponsorship when you're onshore. It does happen, and we're bringing doctors to Australia for clinics, hospitals, etc. But the story is it's very hard, and the priority skilled migration occupation list is not the golden pathway. If you don't have a sponsor, you don't get invited. You if you don't have a sponsor, you won't get a 482 visa or a 494 visa from the priority skilled migration occupation list. That makes
So
sense. The
it does,
importance is having somebody to sponsor you.
which which sort of highlights something we've spoken about a number of times, David, is about if you are not here in Australia,
Yeah,
it's
correct. You're out
the
of the game.
network. Well, you need to start building contacts, networks. You need to be leveraging LinkedIn. You need to be
Talk to
talking
recruiters. Talk
in
to
alumni
workforces.
groups. Yeah,
Correct.
alumni groups.
Correct.
Anyone, because you never know when you'll get a useful contact, a useful introduction.
I mean,
That's what you're gonna need.
we must be fair. The businesses that have the businesses that participate in the occupations on the priority skilled migration occupation list, those businesses are allowed to bring people in, and so the government's being fair there. But the people who want to work in those businesses, it's very difficult for them to come in if they don't know how to, or it's very difficult to be considered if they don't know how to approach these businesses that need the labour that they have offshore. It's much easier for those who are onshore to fill those gaps. That said, when we do bring people in, it's very quick, and the businesses are treated well, and the applicants are treated well because the government realises it's priority occupations. Like doctors can come in still easily and quickly, but if they don't have a clinic or a hospital behind them, they've got to go independent 189, 190, and they're not being processed offshore. Onshore, yes, doctors, nurses, dentists, not dentists. I say dentist is a habit. It's a bad habit. Doctors
Yeah.
and nurses can still get PR onshore. I think I might have mentioned the other day we had 4 doctors invited for 189s, and they're all onshore. Those who are offshore have to wait, but those who are offshore who get sponsored by a business don't have to wait.
What about those other health professionals that we are crying out for? Like, there still seems to be a shortage of nurses here.
Yeah,
So,
they're on the list. They're on the priority skilled migration occupation list.
and is the situation the same that they need to be onshore already?
For the 189, 190, they have to be onshore because the states and territories are not bringing in on their list. They're not bringing in people from overseas,
Okay.
but businesses are allowed to bring people in from overseas. That
Okay.
is, I mean, when we say a business, a hospital, if
So
a hospital
private hospitals, private clinics.
public hospitals too,
Yeah.
hospitals as well. But the story is that you have to be 482 visaed or 494 visaed to be sponsored from overseas. If you're wanting a 189 or a 190, or 190, you're not going to get, the states will not endorse you. They will not nominate you
Do you think
from
there's
overseas.
do you think there'll be some change when the new financial year rolls around in
Well, I want to see
July?
I want to see what they realise from their budget, what they put into practice, and it'll be very interesting because it could be different, could be significantly different. I want to see what the occupationalists bring to the table. I want to see when the states and territories resume their state and territory sponsorship, their 190s. Very often, or this past COVID year, 2020, a lot of state programs were non-existent or lethargic July, August, and didn't really kick off until later, October. Remains to be seen. One thing that hasn't changed is the insatiable need for labour from offshore, skilled labour from offshore. Never changed. It's probably more intense, more needed now than ever. I think I've talked about in the past restaurants and cafes around my workplace shutting down, working reduced hours because they don't have the labour. They can't get it locally.
It just seems incongruous. I mean, they're all the businesses that were employing international students, and sometimes the partners of international students and whatnot. But if they've all gone home, and we're not replacing them, it's
What they're also doing too is granting visas to people offshore, but that's not as joyous a celebration as it was pre-COVID because you still can't come depending on your visa subclass.
right.
If you're a fiance and you've been granted a 300 visa, you've got to wait unless you've got compelling reasons. If you're a student and you're in a different time zone, they'll give you a visa. Their argument is, and it makes sense to a certain extent, is that once the borders do drop, you'll beat the rush because you've already got a visa and you can just come.
Yeah, yeah.
That's a fair call. That's a fair call. But we don't know when the borders will drop, and that's where the students and offshore fiancés suffer a lot of stress and anxiety.
And that's where the frustration in the business community seems to be, is that a number of other countries are putting a timetable and stages on international travel and allowing all sorts of people back into their countries.
Correct. Canada is a prime
haven't
example.
done
The
that.
United States is an example. United
Yep.
Kingdom.
Yep.
They're all doing it.
And we haven't done that at all. And there just seems to be no likelihood that that's where this government will go.
In immigration, it's a movable feast, and things change and chop and change. So, I'm very interested to see what July brings, and when, excuse me, when a larger portion of the population is vaccinated. I want to see what changes that influences, what changes that brings. International students coming in, we say often, business people, investors, and international students, the three most important groups of migrants to come to the country. We need all three. And business and investors and business people can come. They can come. International students can't at this stage.
Now, I've been being grumpy old man in this episode, and I'll just say one more thing, David, to buttress why my outlook is so gloomy. That looks like we've got the vaccination program back on track in Australia, but it took the two biggest state governments to actually grab hold of it, do a program outside of the federal government's one, and to source somehow new vaccine supplies that the federal government wasn't talking about 3 months ago. And now people under 50 are queuing up to get vaccinated. Now, it just seems like there hasn't been a willingness to do the things that need to be done. Maybe that's going to change. Maybe that's going to change, David. I just hope so.
I mean, even if it does change, I mean, we are safe. We have handled.
Oh, we're safe.
The crisis
not a problem.
in some ways well, but to burn so many people, to burn so many wonderful international students. I mean, it's no surprise that people are choosing to do undergrad and postgrad study in different countries now, and I don't blame them. If we were stuck with visas and we had to study with a 5 to 8 hour time difference, and that was the full fee paying. Some schools are offering discounts, full fee paying. Of course, we go somewhere that they're actually accepting as Canada, United States, United Kingdom.
I just don't think people are considering the damage that we're doing for 2023, 2024.
I mean,
if the farmers think it's hard to get backpackers to pick fruit this year, God, gee, in 2 years' time, I think we'll be looking back saying, what did we do? It's not like we're the only country in the world that relies on incoming skilled labour.
I don't know. I don't know if this government has the capacity for retrospective thought.
I don't think they got the interest in it. That's my disappointment. But I don't enjoy being critical and disheartened about it, because it just doesn't seem that it should be so hard, David. I can see, you can look across to all sorts of other countries that seem to be doing it better, and they've had to deal with bigger health crises than we have. It's only Melbourne that had to deal with a real crisis, and we had nothing like what they've dealt with in Italy. And you and
I are voracious, vociferous, rabid fans of migration. We eat migration, we adore it, and it's very sad to see us without the necessary labour and skills, and also too from a personal level, they bring an energy and vitality to the cities that's lacking at the moment.
But
You walk the streets. Have you been into the city?
I have. I don't. I'm still very careful about COVID, David. I don't believe that it's gone. So if I can avoid going places where I'm going to be bumping shoulders with people who are coughing and spluttering and not wearing their masks, well, I do that. So if I have to go to the city, it's for an appointed occasion, and I I don't go in peak time. That's for sure.
Well,
Even though peak time is nothing.
With the international students gone, we're back to a Melbourne that you and I grew up in. It's sort of after 5, it's dead.
And all the leaves blowing around in the streets, and the only things you see, the only vehicles. Yeah, you sound very COVIDy there, David. What's going on? You'd only see a delivery truck going down the street. It was a lonely place when
for those
we're talking the 80s in Melbourne. Oh,
didn't everything shut down midday on Saturday, and then the only things open on Saturday afternoon were movie houses and pubs, and Sunday movie houses and pubs,
and the mixed business. But there's no mixed businesses
Sunday trading.
anymore.
Remember, there's no Sunday trading.
Yeah.
And do you remember who fought and won? Frank Penhalierick.
The hardware guy.
The hardware guy. Winter.
The hardware guy from Caulfield.
That's
the hardware guy from Caulfield. There we go.
But you know, one of the things that might force people to sort of smile ruefully, the government's going to increase consular assistance to those. The budget. They're going to increase consular assistance to those who are affected by COVID-19 and trapped offshore. Having consular assistance over the years, you and I have talked about consular assistance. It depends on who you are and what your background is, as to what the Australian government will and will not do for you.
Yeah, and look, the other thing that was interesting, not really migration, but in terms of our international relations, was a decrease in the level of foreign aid, but an increase for selected countries like Papua New Guinea and Samoa. I think there are a couple of the other South Pacific nations got an increase in their level of foreign aid, but for everyone else, it's been a decrease. A decrease in university funding, David, which again says to me that it's going to be very, very difficult for the universities to gear up to take significant numbers of international students. I just can't see the capacity unless they want to dip into their foundation money and all that kind of stuff. But I think they're more likely to build a swimming pool or a new building named after a benefactor than to go, oh yes, let's us fund quarantine to bring students in. I can't see that happening.
It would be nice if it happened, but I tend to agree with you. They will talk about it, as you said earlier.
They'll talk about it.
Whether they realise it or not, that's another question.
They'll approach the government. The state governments all get together and ask the federal government to meet them halfway, and they'll still be talking about it this time next year. That's what I think.
550 million over the next 4 years set aside for global talent visas for highly talented, highly skilled individuals. That's we've been involved in a few. We've been involved in a few of those. They're a good visa. They're processed in a timely fashion. Streamlining details are yet to be released, though. How much faster they will become.
Now, David, when we talk about the global talent visa, the exceptional talent visa, however we want to describe it, who is that actually open to? Is it celebrities, movie stars, sports people? For instance, if someone like Elon Musk wanted to use a visa, would he be using that?
He could use the $15 million.
Well, he's going to just use the money. But I guess the point I'm getting to is if it's an inventor, someone with, let's say, a startup in IT or something like that? Are they the people who are getting it, or what about the people that I deal with in one of my other podcasts all the time, David? The highly skilled, knowledgeable academics who are working in ecology and biology and all those kind of fields. Are they getting this visa, or are they
There's
not in
there's
the running?
I'll whip up the prime categories so that I quote them accurately. There's those who are in the arts, the humanities, sport, and business, but then there are specific occupations, specific fields like biotechnology, and I'll give you the actual
Yeah.
categories so
And
people listening
and
can be mindful
and
and aware of them.
and while you're looking it up, let me throw the arts at you. Does the arts they're saying the arts that includes all the movie stars and all the production facilities and all that going to Byron Bay,
Producers, yeah, correct, that's
but
right.
it but it but at the same time, there's virtually no funding, and hasn't been since the start of COVID, for anyone involved in the arts here, unless it's movie production or they've put some money into getting a couple of the musicals up and running. But there's nothing for the people who are producing pottery and glass blowers
No,
and
no.
documentary makers and podcast producers. There's so so the point I'm making is, and you can tell me if I'm wrong. My friends, and I use that term ill-advisedly because we're only online acquaintances, but the people who are struggling to maintain careers that they've built here in academia are not likely to get the visa we're talking about now, are they?
The tech and talent. Tech is the big one. Biotech is the big one. I'll give you the fields, and
It,
then we'll talk. Then we'll
so
talk
it's
about
a,
it.
it is it a big money visa, David?
Okay, yeah.
There's a big
He,
payoff in biotech. There's a big
It's
payoff in
Direction 89. The Direction 89. It's resources. It's agri-food, agri-tech. It's energy. It's health industries. It's defence, advanced manufacturing and space. It's circular economy. It's digitech. It's infrastructure and tourism. It's financial services and fintech, and it's education. They're the target sectors, and you get this if you're in the 10 targeted sectors. You get it like reasonably quickly.
so what
Reasonably quickly.
so what would education be? That would be someone coming to take a fellowship at the Grattan Institute.
It'd be somebody who's might be an entrepreneur who's created a new app, something that will revolutionise. You've got to be a revolutionary, a creator, an entrepreneur of sorts. Someone bringing something that Australia doesn't have, and making Australia more competitive on an international field. If
So
you
how
are
many
a
how many of these visas are there
15,
up?
I think this numbers. I wrote it down because as I became a lawyer, because numbers are anathema to me. I think it's about 15,000. 15,000.
So
But I mean, if you are a
so
if
so
you're a
there weren't 15,000 apps last year
no, but not
that were
necessarily
that
apps.
are in the world that are going to.
I'm talking about people who can bring talent. I mean, if you're a specialist professor in something that will increase world standing, Australia's standing in the world. No. I mean, if you're a Amharic, all right, let's choose a really random language. If you publish books in Aramaic, you're not going to get a global talent visa. But if you are a published academic and you are recognised globally for your expertise in the field, then you stand a strong chance. The question is, do you want to come? Do you want to come? Would you
Well,
want to come?
well, my struggle with all this stuff is, David, what about the people who are already here, who have built careers, who have been contributing to the economy, and their pathways seem to be dying, and they're exceptional talent. I mean, if you're the world expert on zebrafinch sperm, you know that that seems to me to be equally as valid as if you can manage to kick 2 goals every second week in the A League.
Yeah, but the sportsmen get a different visa.
Oh, there's a special
I
one for
mean, they're
them.
different. It's a case by case basis. The facts of the case determine which is the most appropriate visa. But I mean, what did you call? What was your example of expertise in? What?
Well, maybe the motility of the zebra finch sperm. You know, it just seems to me that, look, I don't know. I'm being grumpy and grouchy today, but there's people who are contributing here, who are building careers here. I get annoyed when I see the producer. I mean, we talked about him once before, the brother of the Jonas Brothers, right? The unfamous Jonas brother who got a visa because he's a producer. Well, we got producers here, mate. You know, we don't need a lot of these people if we're talking about utilising the skills we've already got here. And that's what breaks my heart. I don't
Story
care
is
about the bloody Jonas brother.
story is immigration is always going to break our hearts because it's an imperfect system. We've got to use what we have and apply what the law says to bring people here. And we're doing people a good favour if we talk about what can and cannot be done so that they don't jump into something that won't work. And too often I hear of stories where it has been ill prepared, people have been ill prepared or been over reliant on people from offshore, and they've come a cropper. And we don't want that.
Okay. Let's find the good things in the budget, David. Let's lift the tone. What were the good things, migration focus in the budget?
I'm glad because it was descending into
I know I was being a grumpy,
of doom and
bugger.
gloom. Well, the numbers. I mean, we've talked about numbers. The humanitarian program's unchanged in terms of numbers. We won't go into that because inevitably we'll talk about the way Australia treats displaced people, and we don't want to go into that because we know that Australia doesn't treat displaced people too well. People on the sponsored temporary parent visa, if they've been hampered to get here, they've got an 18-month extension on the validity of their visa. There's the extension of the validity on the visa is a good thing. Made a few more notes. The ATO will advise in conjunction with the Department of Home Affairs distinguished talent visas and the global talent visa on taxation advice. People coming from jurisdictions, what they will get, tax residency rules simplified. So that's a good thing. If you're an prominent international, and you need to come in and out of Australia, there's tax residency rules to consider. So the ATO is going to play a more active role with the department in simplifying tax residency rules for global talent visa holders. What else?
I'm sure a lot of them will still be getting their advice from the accountants in the Virgin Islands, though.
I'll ignore that. The 408, yeah. Look, that's become probably the most sensible visa in a long time.
Okay, 408. 408.
It's going to be extended.
Let's pretend that the people listening don't have that tattooed on their arm.
The COVID visa. People who want to stay or can't leave can apply for the 408 COVID visa. And if you're working, I'll give you some examples. We've got people we've helped who've been in the hospitality sector cleaning COVID rooms. If you're cleaning COVID hotels, quarantine hotels, you'll stay. You can stay. If you're working in hospitality now, you can stay. And they'll grant their visas for up to 12 months, which is good. Today, we got a kindergarten teacher. Her COVID visa was granted for 1 year. It's wonderful. COVID visas can be employed to keep people here. If you've come to the end of your graduate visa or you've come to the end of your 482 working visa, you can prepare for the 408 visa. It's the no option left visa.
Does it extend the conditions you've already got, or are there different conditions?
When you apply, you're linked to the employer who is you're working for the COVID visa. So if you're for 482 and you're staying with the same employer, you get the condition that you work for that person. If you are working in your chosen field, that's not a burden. But if you're doing something in hospitality because you've worked at while you've studied your degree in commerce, or it's going to be hard for people who want to progress. People who want to progress need a pathway. The 408 prolongs. Those who have a pathway and are working in their occupation can use the 408 to get more Australian work experience, to solidify their position with their sponsor, so that when they want another 482, they're in a position to get it, or that year of work experience might render them eligible to make an application onshore for permanent residency by a 189 or the 190 state sponsored.
Or, David, should I say this a bit quietly, a bit of a secret? Or find an Australian partner.
Or find an Australian partner. And what happens is the 408, if you get a 408 for 12 months and you've been living with an Australian partner, you get over the threshold in the 12 months, or you register your relationship under state law, or you marry. I mean, there's many ways to skin a cat. Immigration's like chess, there's many moves. And as I was saying at the start, if you're in a legitimate, real relationship, that's going to be a better way to migrate than having skill and talent that is high but not recognised.
But just a precautionary statement, David. Don't skin a cat, because that might raise all sorts of character issues for you.
Now, one of the things that is going to be extended presently when we do 408s, we've got to do them within 28 days of the visa expiring. They're going to allow 90 days now.
And is that because there was a backlog in how they were processing them? So that
that's good. That's a good thing.
Know?
If you're the backlog, a backlog is a beautiful thing. If you want to stay in Australia, seriously, it's a beautiful thing.
Because nothing changes.
Nothing. If you are in a job you love, and your visa is coming to an end, and they can't sponsor you to permanent residency, but you've got an avenue with Australian work experience, you've got an avenue for independent migration, use the 408 to stay here for another year. And, I mean, this is something that people may or may not think about, but it's a beautiful thing. The longer you're here, the more time you get to accrue work experience, solidify your position within the business, and outweigh the pandemic.
David, something just came to mind. Because the 408 visa is new.
Newish. It's about a year and a bit. It's a pandemic visa.
Because COVID's new, I don't think there's probably a whole lot of people like yourself written anything about it. There should be a blog post about it, David.
There's a bit of literature out there on various websites, but the story is it's a great visa, and it's the only one you don't want to be processed quickly during COVID. And they won't refuse them, because then we put them in for review and it will clog up review, and you get 18 months, 2 years to wait. I mean, this is what we do. I mean, you know, if somebody wants to stay here and they've got a job in a critical skill sector, or they're going to get a job in a critical skill sector, or they're going to work in agriculture, which is a critical skill sector. I've got helped people in teaching, medicine, hospitality with 408 visas, and they're a beautiful way to stay here and stay safe and stay working, stay earning Australian dollars, and not have to go home and wait for pandemic to finish offshore. As long as the World Health Organization says we're in pandemic mode, the 408 visa will exist. It will exist, and it's great. It's great. You know, I am happy to help anybody and everybody who's got no options to put a 408 in. They won't reject it, because we just throw it back in for review and the person automatically gets 18 months. That said, the Australian government is allocating sufficient resources. What was the numbers? I made a note. They're putting in to stop the backlog, to make inroads into the backlog at the AAT in the MR division. They are allocating significant sum of money. 500. What is it? Let's have a look here. I made the numbers. For 54.8 million. So 54.8 million over the next 4 years to bring on more members, more staff to process reviews in a faster, more effective fashion. If somebody puts a review in now for a rejected visa, it'll take 18 months to get a hearing.
Well,
which is a good thing.
I was going to say
that's a great thing.
That's got pluses and minuses.
I mean, if somebody
it
wants
means you get to stay, but it also means that you might solidify your position and then still get the boot.
Somebody who's not considered in a genuine relationship, for example, stays with that partner, proves they're in a genuine relationship. They have a kid, a house, a dog. 18 months down the track. Yeah.
That's right. You were having trouble proving your 2-year relationship, so you got rejected. You have a review, and you get 2 more years to solidify your relationship.
But there's nothing wrong with that.
It's a good system. No, it's a good system.
No, and people, the
so
idea
stop
is to
complaining about the backlogs, everyone.
Backlog is good for those who need it. And people who want to get Australian work experience, those who want to prove their relationship or develop their relationship for review, need it. It's the people who are sad about delay. Well, if they're in priority occupations, they're being processed quickly anyway.
Good. So I'm watching the clock, David. What other good news have we got from the budget before we move into?
I think. Look, we've touched on the few gems, and we've sort of elaborated on those.
People need to summarise. The good news in the budget is all for people who are already here. There's no real good news for people who aren't here.
The people who are offshore who have student visas, when the borders drop, they'll be able to come in faster and they won't be subject to the backlog. They'll be first in. So if you are genuinely interested in study and you do not want or do not mind the odd hour time difference to attend tutorials or attend lectures and do it at, all odd hours of the night and the morning, then you will beat the rush when the borders drop. But if the borders don't drop and you finish your course, a master's course of 2 years duration, what we can and cannot do remains to be seen, and we'll deal with that. We'll deal with that when that comes.
You don't get the benefit of finishing your course here and having that pathway into employment.
A master's is 2 years. A master's is 2 years duration, and if you're finishing in a year's time, we'll have to assess what the situation is for offshore visa holders because the borders haven't dropped. But one would hope the borders have dropped. I'm assuming in that scenario they'd be granted, or they will be granted a 485 offshore to come to Australia. But when the pandemic ends, will that affect that structured system whereby people who are studying offshore get the opportunity? I don't know.
And then there'll be all those issues, David, about will different industries get priority and. But yeah, I mean,
so
much to shake out.
To just go over it one more time, if you do want to come and study, apply for your student visa, and do study at odd hours of the morning and the night, because it will be hell for leather when the borders drop. A lot of people have been upset by their Australian experience studying online, but when it is safe for international students to come, and you do want to come and get your student visa now so that you don't have any delay.
Okay. Well, David, before we leap into our second part of the program, I want to say to people, we're being far more active on the Facebook page. So find the Facebook page, Migrating to Australia podcast, and like it, and you'll get all of the updates for when we're going live. But you'll also start to get a bit more interaction with the new member of my team that is also part of David's team, who's doing a lot of our social media stuff, which is Jessie. And we're trying to be far more active in our outreach to this international student groups and the working visa groups so that questions can come in and I can throw them up to David and he can either bat them away or he can take them on board. Because I think we discussed it last week in terms of those visas that some people were shopping around.
We touch on. I mean, we can touch on now in the second half of the program, which will be. It won't be 50 minutes further. It'll be shorter.
No.
Some of the common mistakes people make in their applications. And one of the most important things, if you want to go all the way to citizenship, all the way, you've got to remember and keep record of everything you've said in every visa you've used to get here and stay here. Because when citizenship is applied for, they'll look at every visa you've made application for, and if there's conflict, you've got issues. Even the passenger card. The passenger card is a false friend. It looks easy. It's small. You've got to be consistent. If you're not consistent and you apply for citizenship, it's like whack-a-mole. You know that game at the fairs where you bang the mole on the head with a hammer? Yeah. The department's like that. You stick your head up for citizenship, you get it knocked off. Another one that people, it sounds crazy, but people who do their own applications for partner visas, if they don't upload properly, a lot of people, I've seen a few people actually, who've lodged their own visa applications for partner visa, and then they've been requested to provide information, and they said, we've already applied, we've already provided it, but they haven't actually uploaded the material properly. You've got to attach it.
So you have to attach it, and you have to get your receipt. You have to see what it says.
You've got to look. You do a print off of everything that you've done, everything you've uploaded, so you've got a record. But you upload it, and then you've got to attach it. So some people just upload, and these are crazy simple mistakes, but people make them, and they're doing it to save money by not engaging someone, and in actual fact, it ends up costing more money. So uploading material. Another one is not responding to requests for information. If you don't respond to a case officer's request within 28 days, you don't have to get your information within 28 days. You have to show you've made effort to get it. If you ignore them, they might give you a second chance, or they might make a decision based on what they have. Once again, delay, money, and very, very painful emotion. With people, devastating to have a visa refused. It's devastating.
David, can you tell us about my favourite one, because it makes me chuckle all the time, about the doctor mistake?
Yeah, do you know what? I talked to a university's cohort of medical students last weekend on a webinar, and it was wonderful. Such brilliant, bright people that are coming to Australia. You've come when we've done a podcast on medical students, and it's very exciting to see who are going to be new Australians. It's wonderful. What happened with this doctor? He wanted to save money. He's a lovely man. He's an Australian citizen now. But what he did, he applied as a general practitioner, but he gave himself 20 points because he thought he equated doctor with doctorate. Now,
so he thought that a GP
was entitled to 20 points for his education, not 15.
So a medical doctor does not make you a PhD.
That's right. And a lot of PhDs would be chuckling into their soy lattes when they hear this, because you know what? There's a 5-point difference. Not everyone can be a doctor. Not everyone can be a PhD holder. Very different skill sets, very different talents, and you have, in the old days, a Bachelor of Medicine, Bachelor of Surgery, or now a Bachelor of Biomed, Doctor of Medicine, and that is a long, long slog, but it's a different slog to a PhD, and the government deems that the PhD is 5 points more worthy.
And of course,
and so he lost.
We won't go over points again. We won't go over all that again. But we've done plenty of episodes where we've stepped through the points you need.
Points have to be.
Points are crucial.
If you're applying for independent migration onshore, because offshore it's not really happening for the 189, 190, 491, you've got to know your points like the times table. You remember the times table at school?
Oh, 12 12's 144.
Yeah, you've got to know. That's it.
11 11's 132.
What about 13 12s? You know 13 12s?
Oh, mate, who needed to know anything past 12 12?
13 12s always killed me. But the story is that you've got to know it back to front, upside down. Another one that's often another common error.
Oh, let me see. Preempt you. Is this the police checks?
Police checks are lethal. You forget a police check for a 485, because a lot of our listeners are onshore and they're international grads going into a 485. You forget a police check, you've got big issues.
But you have to get you have to get two police checks, don't you, David? You have to get the
Depends on
federal
which
police
you've got a
check.
federal police check for Australia. If you come from Italy, if you come from Brazil, you need two police checks. The United States, if you're offshore or if you're onshore here, you need an FBI check as well. Depends the country you come from, the police checks on offer that you must or must not get. There's the Vietnamese police check number one, the Vietnamese police check number two. Police checks are a sort of almost a program to themselves. Getting police checks in COVID time is very hard. It's very hard. And then there are little tricks, like some countries will allow you to get them by proxy, some won't. Some will issue
by
via
proxy, meaning someone else can lodge the application for you.
Mum or dad, you get a letter
at the
of introduction.
desk.
Yeah, correct.
Instead of you flying back
And
to
that's
stand
it.
at the counter.
You don't ever fly back. Don't ever fly back. The worst you might have to do is go up to Canberra to get the embassy. But I mean, most people use a courier for that, so you don't ever have to leave on a plane ever. Don't ever leave on a plane because you'll never get back in, especially in this climate. Another one is, the other one is. I mean, I touched on it before, but if you don't reply to a case officer, they'll make a decision in your absence, and they'll, in the refusal letter, make a note of the fact that they gave you 28 days and heard nothing. That's not good. Where does that happen to people? When they change their email, when they change their address, and they don't notify of the change of address.
Yes, everyone should have the same email, Gmail or Hotmail or whatever that they had when they were when they first set them up. You should keep one.
Some people have given me their they maintain an original email address, but it was from when they were 12 or 13. So funny bunny 19
or sexylover95 at hotmail.com.
So you never, if you want to keep that with the government, that's your business, but don't use them for work. Don't use them for. What would Marina say? We did a show a while back on Marina preparing resumes and applying for jobs in Australia. What does Marina say about funnybunny13@gmail.com and emails like that?
I don't know, but you've just made me think about it's Benny Benny. Come on, buddy, get a handle.
I don't even know. Benny, if you're listening, salam alaikum.
We still love you. Yeah.
Eid Mubarak. But what happens? It's a process like tax, like conveyancing. If you do it yourself, you inherit the risk. So it's buyer beware.
David, Sorry, mate. I was just thinking about those old things. You got old email addresses and whatnot. They don't historical mistakes. What if there was a spelling mistake in a document in the first visa that you did?
No, that's okay.
And you don't pick it up until
there's substantive errors. There's a lot of typographical errors from. Okay, all right. Let's use beautiful Vietnam as an example. A lot of records were destroyed during the war in Vietnam, and so a lot of records are recreated. As long as the provenance can be sourced and explanation for inconsistencies, there's no issues. The Arab world with different Arab dialects is another one. Spelling and one-word surnames, two-word surnames. The government's aware of those and handles those well. It's the substantive errors that people don't, the substantive omissions or substantive errors that the department doesn't like.
Okay, so if you got a reference from someone and your name is Al Majid and your referee, someone wrote you a reference and called you Mr. E.L., dash Majid, and then the next one said Mr. A.L. dash Majid.
What you do, you go to great pain to try and get those persons to issue a corrective statement, but you'd also explain that in the Arab world, some people, on hearing the pronunciation, will write it a different way to others. And then it's a substantive stuff.
And especially Anglo whiteys make mistakes interpreting what your name is.
So you might have a two-word family name, and if it's put together, the department's sensible and they deal with those things well. It's when you're Arthur in one document and Martha in the other that you've got trouble.
What's the don't identify anyone, David, but what's the stupidest mistake you've seen someone make?
Somebody somebody came to see me and they'd put an application in themselves for a preliminary skills assessment. And they were worried. And they only became worried post-fact. They lived in Dandenong. So those of you who don't know Melbourne, Dandenong is 40 kilometres from the city.
Well, they live somewhere that could be Dandenong, that could be 40 kilometres from the city. Yeah, I don't want to identify anyone, Tony.
No. I'm just, and I never identify anybody. The only people who will identify are me and you. And they were working in a rural centre that was more than 90 k's outside of Melbourne. So a 150 kilometre journey. And I was reading the reference letters and I said, "You were late to my appointment because your train was delayed." He said, "That's right."
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's a he, because women are much more sensible than we are, and women don't do silly things or try silly things. Men are much less smart. And I said, "So you were late because you missed the train?" He said, "Yeah." I said, "That's all right, because you rang me. There's no dramas about being late. But your letter says you work double shifts." And he said, "Yeah, that's right." I said, "But there's no train service directly to where you work. You'd have to get a bus at the end of the train." And I said, "So you're telling me that you get up at 2 a.m, 3 a.m. to get a train?" Well, there's no trains. So what he was saying was that he works 40 k's outside Melbourne and does split shifts at a restaurant in a regional centre.
150 kilometres away.
Yeah, so. Yeah. And he realised the folly of it. And he realised that he'd have... I said, "You've got no chance because you're not believable, because your regional centre necessitates a train and then a bus. And you don't have residential accommodation in the regional centre. And it's not believable that you stay there, work all night, and then come home." It was a complete mess.
Apart from the fact that it's probably going to be a 5-hour journey because things don't match up.
Correct. No, there's no direct connections. And so that's the silliest thing I've ever said. I said, "Look, I would withdraw the application if I was you, but I'm not you, and you'll do what you have to do, but you will not succeed. You'll fail." And when anybody gets a skill assessment rejected, that knocks them from applying for temporary residency and or permanent residency, so they have to redo it. But how can he redo something when he's committed in writing that his place of employment's 150 kilometres away? That's the silliest thing I've ever seen happen.
Yeah. I mean, look, you say it all the time, David. You need to be consistent. You need to be truthful. You need to be accurate.
Open hands.
You need to be detailed. You need to be. You just need to. You are opening up your life, and somebody is going to rifle through it.
Every single visa that anybody does to this country requires provision of accurate, correct, consistent information. Doesn't matter if it's a tourist visa or a significant investor visa. You've got to tell the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth.
And I want to stress the point, David, that you already made, but I just want people to understand it, that if you're coming up to the end of your PR/citizenship journey and you've applied for citizenship, they are going to go back and look at, if you came in on a tourist visa first, they're going to look at that, then they're going to look at your student visa application, then they're going to look at if you left and you came back as a backpacker, they're going to look 100%. At what you said on that.
100%.
So
100%.
Keep a file of everything you've ever said to the department and make sure that every time it matches up.
And years, you don't want to be years out. I've seen people with things. I've had omnipresent people visit me, and they're recorded as being in Melbourne and Bangkok, or Melbourne and Rome, or Melbourne
at the same time. Yeah,
at the same time. And I mean, they're oversights, but you know, an oversight is still dangerous if you can't explain it clearly.
Yeah,
this is
or if you can't gather the information to clarify it. That's so. I know. I often, when people say, "When were you in such and such?" and I'll go back, and I'm sometimes a year out, but then you can go back and you can draw your timeline, because when you're as old as us, David, you know, it's hard to keep it. You think, was Was that
I mean,
2005 or was that 2006?
if you genuinely can't remember, you'd sign a statutory declaration and say that there are approximate
So
dates
you're
to the best of
unclear.
your
Yeah.
recollection. But
Yeah.
but don't put it in if you're not certain. Say it's an approximate and sign a statutory declaration to attest to that.
Yeah.
When you do a business visa, it's what you've got on the books that counts, what your official records are. And if you play straight, play with open hands, and show your books, show your details. We've helped people on flights, flight captains and flight attendants, and they've been in 50, 60, 70 countries. And, we just do, look, between this period, 1st of March 2012 to 1st of March 2016, I was constantly flying between, Jakarta and Moscow, Jakarta, Bangkok, whatever. And the department wants you to make a genuine effort.
But you can't say,
every
I was flying around the world.
you're doing
That won't
business
cut it.
visas, your profit and loss, everything has to be accurate and able to be substantiated. You're doing a partner visa, evidence of joint travel has to be substantiated. You're doing a student visa, your past student visa, your academic history at secondary school. Everything has to correlate, everything has to relate, and you have to show a narrative that's consistent and genuine.
So cash money, not often a benefit, David, when it comes to doing anything like this.
No, because it gives you an overinflated value of your business, but you can't include the cash money if it's not declared, if it's not substantiated.
And evidence for partner visas again, David.
Evidence for partner visas.
Make sure that if you are transferring money, that you can show a receipt or a transaction.
My offshore fiance, my offshore spouse gets $200 a week so that they can sustain themselves in whatever country they're in. If you say that and you don't substantiate, it's waste. It can't be used.
Well, it could just be a fairy story. So.
Western Union or direct bank transfers. If you don't trust the banking system, Western Union.
Oh, and all those other things like Gcash and PayPal, and there's so many ways to do it. David?
Well, I think you've given us an idea from this podcast. What we will do.
I'm glad I've done something good today, David. Apart from just being a grizzle guts.
For those who are still with us, when we talked about the global talent visa, given that a substantive sum of money, what the figure was on my notes, I'll just tell you. Hang on. 550 million is going to be committed to attracting talent from overseas in the global talent visa space. Next week we'll do a global talent visa breakdown because we haven't done one of those, have we?
No, and I'm going to give you some homework to do that you won't do, so I'll probably end up doing it and showing you something and you'll tick off on it. I think we'll do a blog post for the 40. Is it what was the 408, the COVID visa? The 408.
You know what? The only reason we haven't done one is because it's been around for so long. But if people are genuinely interested, we can do a deep dive into the 408 because we do a number of them, and they're a great visa to stay here. Visa to stay here.
If you'd like us to put the time into it, because it does take time to do things properly,
got to put some cogent points down and not just ramble.
Hit me up on the Facebook page, on the Migrating to Australia podcast Facebook page.
But remember, the 408
leave
is
a
for
comment.
People who are here. Who are here and they have no other visa option.
But if you'd like it, if you'd like it explained.
Yeah, absolutely. The visa option, though, remember, if you're on a 482 and there's no options, if you're on a 485 and there's no options, if you're on a student visa, 500, 482, 485, there's no options. The 408 is for you, subject to you meeting certain criteria. But just because it's your last option when you apply for that visa, new options can present themselves later.
Can open up later on.
They can open up later. So it buys you more time to be here. It's a great visa. And if no options have opened up, you do another 408 visa. And if none have opened up, you do another 408 visa.
Sorry, Dave. Like I say to all the people who talk to me about how grim it is during COVID, you can look at COVID, this period of time, as an opportunity. It gives you a time to bed down when people are going to understand that things are difficult and different, and use it. Whether it's for a visa or whether it's to learn new things or develop new skills or contact people that you would never have contacted. Let's be positive.
That's it. I mean, we opened up with a bit of doom and gloom, but we've gone back to our upbeat, more positive. So, well, you did. I won't throw you under the bus.
David, we've been making a mistake for a long time. I've always been saying, contact David on Twitter and Instagram, and we've always just said at David Bongiorno. But your Instagram is not at David Bongiorno. That's a different at David Bongiorno. Yes, he's probably being bothered.
My passion, my favourite social medium is Twitter, and that's simply at David Bongiorno, at symbol David, David, Bongiorno, Bongiorno, one word, and that will get a very fast response. My Twitter handle is slightly different.
No, your Instagram handle
my
Instagram is at David _A_C _Bongiorno.
Bongiorno. So there I put my middle name and my confirmation name. But as you'll know, I'll complicate the mix even more. I'm no longer a practicing Catholic, so I've got rid of my confirmation name, so I won't change my Instagram name. So I'm David Andrew Bongiorno, not David Andrew Charles Bongiorno.
And I'm contemplating, David, with the relaunch of the webpage, which I've been talking about for so long, but it's just about there. I'm contemplating doing a migrating to Australia Instagram and really kicking it up. But
we could live stream. We could live stream on Insta as well. But I'll tell you what we do have coming up. In addition to doing a global talent visa next week, what we've got coming up, we've got a Zimbabwean Australian, and this Zimbabwean Australian is a buyer's advocate. And as you and I have discussed, many who come purchase property, and she is a migrant herself. She has the empathy and she has the history of migrating through the system. So if you want to, we're going to talk because she's a fascinating woman. She's got a great story to tell. We'll talk about buyers advocates and what they do, because if you're buying property and you're new to Australia, there are things you need to be aware of, and we don't want anybody who's listening to be exploited by anybody in this country or anybody they use to come to this country. And this person has lived the migration experience, is an Australian citizen, and has gone through it, and so she's here to help, and she's very interested in helping first and second generation migrants.
Yeah, David, you might have noticed I was casting my eyes off into the distance. For those who were listening, you can't have seen that. I'm looking at my whiteboard of what's coming up, and are we doing something on Tuesday night?
We are indeed. We're talking to intellectuals, and you and I.
Oh no, we're not. No, we're not doing that again. That's run its race. That's why I'm asking if we're.
Oh, I thought it had been rescheduled. So we're talking to some disgruntled academics.
No, I'll reach out to them again.
Reschedule that one.
I'm reaching out, David, to somebody, and I probably shouldn't say the name because I haven't had a response yet, but people your age and my age will remember one of the great entertainers, migrant entertainers, that Australia has had the pleasure of being associated with.
The beautiful man Kamal.
I didn't mention his name because I don't have any kind of response yet, David, so I'm going to edit that bit out.
Well, do you know what?
I don't want his people to say, "Oh, they've jumped the gun." We don't want to
jump the gun, but do you know what? It would be wonderful to have him on.
Oh,
it'd be magic. It'd be magic.
And he's been in the news. News a bit, not of his own making, and yeah. So if you are listening now, or if you're catching up on the Facebook page, and I'm loving we're getting lots of interaction on the Facebook page lately. I'm really liking it.
This is good.
Thank you so much.
Can I tell everybody one Kamal story? Because he's a beautiful man.
Tell a Kamal story.
Kamal is a highly talented evergreen performer. He's been performing in Australia, singing for 40, 50 years easy. 40, 50 years? Yeah, at least 40 years. At
Well,
least 40 years.
I can remember him from the 70s, David.
Yeah, so
So
there you go. It's at least 40 years. Easy 40 years, 50 years. My wonderful wife was working during her uni as a barmaid, and he was performing at a pub, and she was the one who presented him with a bouquet of flowers at the end of the performance, and she got a big kiss from Kamal, which she still likes to talk about.
Very good, very good. No, I think so.
An Australian icon. Kamal's an Australian icon.
So I think I teased it a few times. I've reached out to a lot of fairly famous Australians who have come here, or pushing the boundaries a little bit, David, but famous Australians who have dual citizenship elsewhere and have gone elsewhere and built really substantial careers or had a big impact in all sorts of fields.
Migrating from Australia, a new show.
Well, they're still Australians.
They are correct.
And they're dual citizens, but they are substantial people in other countries, but they're unknown here. And so so if you are listening, we're trying to do a Tuesday night, which is a little bit different to what we do on our Saturdays. Of course, we're recording this on our Saturday, and maybe I can grizzle and moan less on a Tuesday, and we'll have more and more fun. But gee, David, it's hard to be upbeat about some things sometimes. So
I mean, there are some. July is a new migration year.
Yeah, and that's what we're looking forward to. The sun is going to rise in July.
We'll see what comes into fruition from the budget and what doesn't, but also too, what happens with the COVID rollout will dictate what happens with international students and visitors coming in. If it's a year, 6 months, it is what it is. There's nothing we can do about it, but we've got to look to see what we can interpret from it, what can and cannot be done.
Well, David, you're looking extremely handsome with that. You're going to grow the goatee happening again, are you?
Do you know what? This is the benefit of having Italian blood. You can grow a beard or semi. Would you say it's in a week's time it'll be a full beard? It's 5-day growth. And,
I don't want to say swarthy, but some people might.
I am looking swarthy. And it blunts a razor. Do you know that? A 5-day growth blunts one razor. So I'll just do one razor a week.
If I get mine to that stage, I'm not far. I can't shave with one razor. I need 2 or even 3, or else I leave bits and cut myself. So. Anyway, this has been David and Grant's personal grooming tips.
I think we can cut 10 minutes off this. 15.
But this will sit out there on the Facebook page and the YouTube channel.
Well, as I always say to guests, it's wonderful. People listen to us on Apple and Spotify, but people, how are the video numbers?
Ghana. People. And by Ghana, I don't mean Africa. I mean in India. It's the main podcast platform is Ghana. It's.
I was thinking of Accra and wonderful beaches in West Africa.
No. Very, very, very interesting. We're still having trouble cracking Africa, David. We need to get Will Atto's mum on to talk about her journey. I'll reach out to Will again this week and see if we can line that up for. I think that one's a good Tuesday night. That'd be fun.
That'd be a ripper.
So and look again, people. If you want to leave it,
if you're listening, you've got a story you want to share, or if you want to share a story with us, come on and we'll talk.
Or if you happen to know somebody who you think would be someone who's got a story to tell that others could benefit from. That's what we're looking for. People who can share a story which will give something to somebody else.
One other guest we do have coming up too is an Italian who's a lecturer at the University of New South Wales, has an MBA from the University of New South Wales, and is working on the side as a meditation teacher. So spiritual, academic, intellectual.
Is that the one you sent me in the last day or so?
Yeah.
And I'm still waiting for our Vietnamese singer, David.
I she's a very busy woman, and I have been most remiss in my following up with her.
We've teased that a number of times. So
she's got to sing for us too, which is the best thing about the podcast.
Yeah,
well, make it a live stream concert.
Well, if we don't have another COVID outbreak in Melbourne in the next couple of weeks, David, we might have to go back to doing face-to-face and actually inviting our guests in to share a coffee with us. And
that's a good way to go.
And doing that again. I don't think I'm going to do Tuesday nights travelling into the office, so David, sorry about that. Especially not with you with your COVID cough. When are you getting the swab stuck up the back of your nose now?
I wouldn't know. Does it go? I haven't had a COVID test. You've had one or two. Does it go up the nose or in the mouth first?
I've had one that went in the mouth down to the back of the throat.
Yeah.
But the first one I had
and then it goes to the nose. The same one goes to the nose, doesn't it?
The first one I had was up the nose, and it felt like it was tapping at the bottom of my brain. It was it's just the most unusual and unpleasant. It's just weird. You're sort of going and you think it should hurt, but it doesn't.
It just feels weird.
But you think nothing should be there in that sort of that part of your head. So, anyway, we've gone from rubber gloves, the department with rubber gloves, to having things stuck up your nose. I hope you've loved this migrating to Australia. Thanks for sticking with us, everybody.
Have a good weekend, everybody.
Do like the Facebook page. I'll be really interested to see who's getting involved. David Bongiorno, Australia's friendliest and best immigration lawyer. See you next time.
Ciao, man. Ciao.